and so excited to start this semester with but one of them, who is teaching here. It is kind of a start of something you guys have done probably for many years, but the idea that internal dialogue is very important and that it's really amazing to get external voices, but also to combine that with internal voices and to see how we can benefit from each other's thinking, collective intelligence, all those beautiful things. So, yeah, excited to give this introduction. It's still my first month, I think. So thank you for everyone sticking with me and helping me through absorbing a lot of information, learning a lot. I will be meeting with all the faculty, I think on Monday, next Monday. And I also wanted to, and it might be already transmitted, I also wanted to start conversations with students. I'll do 30 at a time, so you guys can come, not come, join me, but we'll cut it at 30, but then the next month we'll do another 30. So just to start some dialogues and to see what everyone's thinking and to kind of get into everything in the thinking. But to get back to why we're here tonight, it's a great honor to introduce the speakers today, Marcelo Spina and Georgina Huljich from the Office Patents here in Los Angeles. Founded in 2002 by Marcelo and joined by Georgina in 2006. I'm wearing my, sorry, I'm never very serious. I'm wearing my boots from Argentina because they are here today, so I thought I can show them. Buenos Aires. But yeah, it's an amazing collaboration, the Americas, no? North America and South America, and have that cross-cultural divide being dissolved as it should be. So yeah, they both studied in Rosario, Argentina. I'm checking, actually, yeah, you're also in Rosario. Have had their office patents as a platform for investigations and research in contemporary modes of design and in an increasingly global architecture culture. Marcelo is also a professor, of course, as I said here, at SCI-Arc, but also has had visiting professorships at institutions such as Yale and Harvard, and a little bit at Penn. Georgina has been teaching with us, then us, now not us, at Penn. That's kind of a confusing one. At Penn also, they're both, as you know, incredibly inspirational teachers. But I think to kind of go back to their practice, I should actually say Georgina is also a tenured professor at UCLA, as we know, so where she contributes to the broader culture community through her service on the executive board of the Center of Arts, and was also, as I said, a visiting professor with us. She has been recognized with awards such as the ACSA Faculty Award and the United States Artist Fellowship. But together with Marcelo, they have their office pattern, and one of the first times I actually heard a lecture for the both of them was when they presented their more recent book, Mute Icons and Other Dichotomies of the Real in Architecture at Penn. It's very hard to give talks together, so I am super appreciative that they're willing to do that tonight. But before Mute Icons, they also had another book called Patents Embedded, and they're patents embedded. Yeah, there's many stories that are, you know, there's an interesting thing in architecture about synchronicity. So when I was designing our book, the publisher called me in a panic and said, well, there are other people and they're doing a book on mute icons. And we found out that since they're working with the New York branch and you're working with the Spanish branch, which was kind of idiotic in itself, because I only speak Dutch and English, and they're Spanish and they're working in New York. lived in New York. But it turned out that we both had designed the same cover. And that our books were eerily alike, and so this needed to be resolved. And so I was like, oh, I know them, that is no problem. So yeah, we tried to design it away from them and resolved it more or less. It still looks a little bit similar, I think, but yeah. But this is the beautiful thing. Jung talked about this. This is a philosopher, in case you don't know, or a psychologist, psychiatrist. Jung talked about something called synchronicity, where in culture there are streams of consciousness that are appearing at similar pace in a similar time in different spots of the world. And I always think that is incredibly beautiful to think that we all are an expression of culture, and sometimes this turns out to be the same cover of a different book. Their recent projects, it's a long list, so I chose a few, include the Victory Wellness Center, a significant adaptive reuse project here in LA and North Hollywood that won the 2013 AIA Award, or the Design Honor Award, and is also the recipient of the 2025 AA Healthcare Design Award. Furthermore, they're working on the Olympia Towers, a 1.8 million square foot mixed-use complex here in downtown LA. The Reef Project, a 2 million square foot mixed-use project for South Park in LA. The Grand Avenue Tower, 180,000 square foot mixed-use project in downtown LA. And Mali, a contemporary art wing for the Lima Art Museum in Lima, Peru. And then the Karma Kandara master plan for Bali in Indonesia. I've been following a little bit with them. So really looking forward to hearing your lecture. Welcome both, and please join me in welcoming Marcelo and Georgina.
Wow, thank you, Winka, for the introduction. I didn't know you knew the story. Actually, it was a funny story, as you explained. And we said to them, like, Winka is a friend, but you figure this out because they were just too close to each other. But you know, both beautiful books, you know. So I mean, at the end, you know, what's beautiful is beautiful. So anyway, it's a pleasure to be here tonight for both of us. Opening the cycle under a new director who's not only an esteemed colleague but also a friend. Two disclaimers to begin. First, you know, most of you know this, that this is the hardest lecture to give, you know, to talk to our community of colleagues, students, faculty, friends from both SCI-Arc, UCLA, but you know, Los Angeles in general. So we don't take this lightly, and that this is ultimately for you. And this is a new lecture. So as I was telling my students last day, I wasn't here today, of course. This is the kind of thing that keeps me up at night. Georgina, on the other hand, she sleeps pretty soundly. So, you know, that's that. Second, I think we were talking with Dwayne. It was 2009, the last time I lectured here. So that was 16 years ago. The school is a different place, and so is the world. So we really hope we don't have to wait until 2041 to be back, which is a lot, you know. So.
Okay, so we want to start by giving you just a little peek into our world. This is us, Patterns. This video moves through various instances of our office in Los Angeles. Many different colleagues and also collaborators like throughout the many years that we've been practicing. We are a small studio. We work horizontally, and we have a very profound interest in collaborating with colleagues in Los Angeles and across the world. These people are architects, artists, choreographers, curators, producers, makers, and you name them. We make sketches, we make drawings, models, objects, and buildings. Ultimately, we really try to make culture. We try to make architecture culture. So Patterns for us has always been an inspiration as it represents material form and geometry, but also social habits and human behavior. We always seek to integrate all these ideas by turning everything that seems to be intangible qualities of life into somewhat of a physical presence. We always wanted to work globally to engage and learn from very different cultures, and after approximately 20 years of doing this, we have ended up building projects in different parts of the world. Probably, I don't know, maybe you might have seen a few of them. Also, I mean, as Winka was mentioning before, in 2021, we published new icons to position our view, both in history, discipline, but also in practice and culture. The book is part atlas, is part manifesto, and it's also part monograph, but most importantly, it was the first draft of somewhat of a new line of research in our practice that started to explore ideas of context. In the book, we analyze both historical presence and our own projects, looking to develop a language and a sensibility for discovering parallel, sometimes contradictory, and even unexpected readings of images in architecture. And when articulating and discussing these images, we now realize that we were not just representing architecture as a constructed reality, but we were mostly reconstructing and representing contexts, whether it's by rendering Budapest at night, as you see here, along a consolidated block of Art Nouveau facades, or perhaps by reconstructing an entire aerial photo to place our projects in the most real of ways. So it was actually the power of context that allowed the architecture, almost in its own abstraction, to exist as a form of irritant that is representing, augmenting, and transforming reality. In fact, for all this abstraction, for all the reductionism and even formalism of mur icons, context, and call it, I mean, however historic or generic or even banal or pragmatic or surreal, context was always implicit in the work, either as an image or as a narrative.
And in fact, when arguing about mur icons, we use Black Square from Kazimir Malevich as an example. For all its radical abstraction and reductionism, often described as the 0 point of art, when Malevich first exhibited the painting, he hung it in the corner of the room, the so-called beautiful corner. That means the place reserved in Russian Orthodox homes for religious sites and icons. That single gesture, we will argue, transformed the painting's meaning. The abstraction didn't lose its power, but gained new resonance through a cultural context, becoming at once sacred, symbolic, and truly disruptive, or to paraphrase ourselves, an icon that is unambiguously mute. So to cut to the chase and use an example that everyone knows, the pavilion outside called League of Shadows, we want to argue that even the most reductive, abstract, or autonomous form never exists in isolation. Context, whether cultural, urban, material, or environmental in this case, does not diminish originality but amplifies it. Beyond abstraction, Malevich's lesson is clear. When you have a corner, use it. Place the object in the corner, minimize its footprint, orient it to cast shadow and provide comfort, create a recognizable outline, mute outside, welcoming inside, and maybe create a useful landmark. So architecture becomes meaningful not by ignoring surrounding and contingency, but by engaging with it. And while location matters a lot, of course, as architects, we don't make icons. We make buildings, or a pavilion in this case. Only culture makes icons. This is also context, and it can be other than downtown Los Angeles in so many sci-fi versions. And our project is, of course, right there. So from abstraction to realism to popular culture, this is where we want our architecture to be. So we see an intimate engagement with context as a basis for originality in architecture. Nothing comes from nothing. Architecture is never free of what surrounds it, and yet the discipline, and sometimes ourselves, continue to chase the fantasy of the tabula rasa, Originality does not arise from erasure or empty novelty, but from the radical transformation of what's already there. The given is not neutral, but unstable, and has the capacity to shape what comes next. So for us, architecture is about working with existing conditions, rather than against them, turning the inherited, the ordinary, the obvious, and the overlooked sometimes into content, mystery, and imagination. And while we're not afraid of imposition, we seek a new balance in working with what's already there. Whether the given is a roof typology in Indonesia, a monolithic ground in the Arabian Peninsula, or a rural site in South America, or a post-industrial site in Los Angeles. In each case, the conditions differ, but the principle is the same. Context is no neutral background for architects to land objects onto. It is an active ground for originality and maybe the new.
So in the book, Architecture Without Architects, Bernard Rudowski argued that architecture can emerge through adaptation, through vernacular forms that are shaped by climate, by topography, and by material constraints. This was not about nostalgia, but it was about an intelligence that is embedded in local traditions. For example, how villages, houses, and settlements evolved by necessity, producing forms that were both ecological, but they were also ingenious. So vernacular adaptation, or what we call strange vernacular, is one kind of very particular intelligence. Yet in contemporary architecture, and certainly our practice, and of course many others, operates across very different conditions and context. In urban context, we confront not only archetypes and traditions, but also the specificity of existing buildings and sites, such as, for example, the distribution of land and infrastructure, the density of buildings, the weight of inherited forms and their features, the contingencies of use, materials, methods, and so on and so forth. Just to name a few. But all of these are active conditions that can be worked with rather than against. And of course, context is always precedent, and much like the range of antecedents that you can see here from the pages of the book, Muricons, we really aim to absorb these projects into our own work.
But context is also family and lineage, in this case of our own work. Certain tropes are always there and always changing. And you'll be the judge, of course. And even though we don't think of process is ever this reductive, we're always trying to clarify and communicate our works to different audience and also the public. So while there's always a layer of autonomy in what we do, context is also narrative. We like collections and taxonomies, but the world and architecture is far more complicated. Context is a collective construct. This image shows journalists we interviewed for the Fallen Journalist Memorial in DC. We were shortlisted for. Almost all of them with experience in conflict zones. We spoke about the meaning of the First Amendment and the freedom of the press, which we wanted to mention tonight because it's still so relevant and so under attack today. So context is always political. They describe their work as collecting different points of view to get closer to the truth, and they use the term aggregating perspectives. We found that phrase especially powerful. We think of context as a way of aggregating perspectives on our own work. We don't seek the truth, and we're not afraid of formalism either. But for us, form has an expanded role in architecture and culture and must evolve and change. Across diverse sites and projects, we've developed an attitude and a language that is flexible enough to absorb and transform the specificities of context, sometimes hybridizing with vernacular forms or local materials, colliding with urban circumstance, or at other times generating new context altogether. So this is not architecture without architects, not a simple contextualism, but architecture after context. Author, deliberate, and original because it negotiates with and transforms directly what exists. So after context, which is also the tentative working title of our next book, suggests both architecture in the pursuit of context, but also architecture beyond context. And it is in that vein that we would like to present and discuss some of our work tonight. We organize the lecture in themes according to context, of course. There's a lot of layering and density and specificity in what we will show, which we hope it's not just a kind of pure imagery, but it conveys our attitude towards the subject matter. So we'd like to start in Los Angeles, actually San Fernando Valley to be precise. And for all the tradition of the urban fabric of Los Angeles is increasingly populated with an existing building stock. Banal strip malls, generic warehouses, sprawling and never-ending urbanism of stuff. Here, context is reuse. This is Victory Wellness Center, an adaptive reuse project in North Hollywood that Winka was talking about. We did this in collaboration with Jose Rasti, who's the architect of record, who's here in the audience, Matt Melnick, who helped us with structure, and Tina Chi for landscape, among a number of other set of collaborators, for around 7 years, so kind of insane. Our project converts the existing single-story, 17,000 square feet bowstring truss building into a 3-story, 42,000 square feet facility with almost 16,000 square feet of open space. You have it, I said it, I'm not going to talk about numbers anymore. The task was to design a medical campus integrating these 2 adjacent buildings, and the parking lot behind. It's pretty ugly stuff. This was the existing site as we encountered it. The old supermarket in the corner, which dates from after the war, and the other one, which we refer internally as a Valley brutalism, which dates from the 60s. We focus on the bowstring truss building, pretty amazing space with like 147 feet of span. This diagram shows a kind of our subtractive and additive approach to the shape of the building and to creating a campus, demolish 2 bays of the building to create space from front and back, and continuity, carved courtyards to bring light into the basement, new articulated facade to the open plaza, as you can see then sort of before and after. You can see here how narrow the space between the 2 buildings. I think it was barely 6 feet. And this is what happens right now, where like there's 2 things we didn't really touch. We only painted the building on the right. The space in between these becomes much more organic and ample and generous, and also creates kind of promenade towards Victory. In the location plan, you could also see the size of the building relative to the context, especially the residential areas on the north. We thought it was important to break the scale of the building without destroying its character. And this is one of the things that we usually try to do. So the courtyard cuts, as well as the crystalline extensions, bring kind of smaller, almost residential scale to the overall mass. But do so maintaining the legibility of the roof. We didn't want to just add stuff that will disrupt the nature of it. We wanted to read this within the unifying silhouette of the existing. That means we wanted to really have it both ways, to make the cake and eat it as well. In section, you can see a form of subterranean urbanism, and paraphrasing Mimi Zeiger, as she described it in an article about the project. Of course, there's a sustainability thing. I'm not going to explain this. Plans are quite packed and labyrinthine. Not going to talk much about it, but it includes elderly care, urgent care, as well as spaces for physical, psychological therapy and yoga studios. In this view, you can see the building with the Burbank Airport and the San Fernando Valley Mountains in the background. It's both suburban, but in a certain way metropolitan, and you can see how the space of the street gets extended inside. The challenge of this project was how to reshape this existing building by making both useful and meaningful. We used glass and corrugated metal in the new facade and painted the existing brick into gray to sort of unify, all anew. The courtyards, which are the real start of the project, kind of introduce depth into the facade through diagonal cuts, which basically add a little bit of a kind of figural presence from outside. These cuts introduce depth in the otherwise opaque building, which is kind of sided, and to create a different presence on the street, meaning mute but also engaging. So the courtyards are the heart of the building. They are kind of the excavated moments where the full sectional stratification and spatiality can be lived and experienced. And also where communal life will take place, which is something we had to explain to the users because they were not quite familiar with that form of healthcare. We're also creating, planters and to create a sense of cascading effect, inside the spaces to bring texture and again break down the scale. Also in the courtyard, you can perceive the layering of existing brick, steel shoring, retaining walls, planters and vegetation, all kind of, bringing a scale down, from the ground all the way to what's actually a basement. We use native and local species to support the kind of microclimate. You know, this is San Fernando Valley, so in summer days, it can be a few degrees cooler down there, and actually it's pretty amazing. So every courtyard has a different character. The lobby faces both the plaza and outside, and there's plenty of retrofitting, and so you see how the punctuation of steel bracing in the spaces become a little bit of a protagonist. This is what happens when the bowstring truss meets this sort of new facade, and this is when you get outside, where you also read back into Victory the different levels of the building. And in this interior corner view, the building shows a kind of civic-minded character, you know, with a fragment of the curved roof and the minaret-like vertical sign tower in the composition. This was important, you know, to us. And then again, the layering of interior spaces in contrast with the street and the complicated but yet unified legibility of the roofline with the new facade. We did this film in collaboration with the SCI-Arc TV team. You know, they have amazing resources, and also with Hannah Agency. It shows our attitude towards context maybe in a different way, you know, in a more cinematic way, if you will, somehow connecting the world of the street. You see a lot of our actors there that are many of our own people, which is funny, you know. Connecting the outside world, the strip malls across the street, and the expansiveness of context with the interior spaces, material, subterranean ecology of the building. You know, we think when showing architecture, we try to be persuasive not only with our ideas, but also with the way we think the spaces ought to be lived and experienced, and the way we show them. Somehow we think, I don't know who's that guy, yeah. Anyway, we didn't talk about sustainability, well, we just mentioned, but as you know, and I want to be careful about this because it's a serious subject, maintaining an existing building is one of the most sustainable things you can do as an architect. And we also think making a meaningful impact to a transforming community, it's also the right thing to do if you can. And so we're very proud of the reception, support, and praise that this project has received. And in a weird way, I know as a practice that's considered formally by us and maybe people outside, it's an interesting thing when you're put in a position by context, by constraint, to do just very little and mostly on existing sandbox. Sometimes you can show something that you've never done before, and it's entirely new, and this is something that we're actually quite happy about it.
So, sorry, I don't have the music, the background music now, so it's not going to sound.
It was too epic.
So, context is also community, and this is a project that we did for the LA Dance Project in downtown, here in downtown LA. Basically, the project adapts and transforms a brick warehouse into a state-of-the-art facility for this dance company. And similar to the Victory Boulevard project, we had to, once again, formulate an attitude towards adaptive reuse, towards materiality, and towards the very careful transformation of a rich urban fabric and its own community. So we propose maintaining the character of the front brick volumes by shaping and integrating them, while at the same time providing open space towards the street. We had to create a new interior, but for us, creating a new interior meant creating a new roof line, actually a new roof volume that reimagines the old warehouse corrugated roof into a series of oblique rotating masses. So the new image here advertises the presence of something different, something that is perhaps more civic, maybe a bit strange, but has still a very familiar character. The same character provides for an interior and exterior relationship. In here, the needs and magic of dance and choreography connect with the human need for natural light, mystery, and imagination. And context is always climate. And of course, here in Southern California, context is heat. So Cadigan is a building for Claremont Graduate University that integrates principles of comfort and ecology into an organizational and formal framework, perhaps a kind of collaborative ecosystem. So generally, the project involves a series of discrete and overlapping volumes around a fully open courtyard space that is at the same time, creates a kind of a porosity to allow the building to integrate with the campus and all its surrounding. The interior space is what we call a cascading agora, and with no doubts, it became a true space for collaboration. And as the university asked for a gold LEED building, we propose that all circulations and corridors be outdoor. And we use overhangs and shade and shadow and depth and orientation to create a livable and comfortable environment. Of course, we wanted to make a sustainable building. I mean, everybody wants that, but we also wanted to have users commit to it. But you know, sustainability also requires human commitment, and that could be a bit uncomfortable sometimes. But luckily, Buro Happo made sure that this could, in fact, work, and the client was actually convinced, and we could proceed with the same scheme. So the Agora is, in fact, an amphitheater with an exhibition space that can be transformed into a stage for what is an open proscenium theater. Then, in this case, context is also transformation. On the exterior, the stacking and overhanging masses are cladded in black granite, expressing an institutional and maybe a bit of a brutal character. Perhaps even a landmark, but one that is lively, that is human-centric, and it is ecologically and physically inspiring. And context is also media, or even popular culture. Here we are still in LA, but this time in West Hollywood, which is probably the most cliché, but also the most recognized part of the city. And like Times Square, or kind of going into what Times Square is, West Hollywood is dominated by the culture of the image, as you all know. Advertisement is absolutely everything and takes precedent over architecture. How to integrate art, advertisement, and architecture is a subject of a competition program from the city of West Hollywood that most of you are aware of. We were lucky enough to win 2 of them, be commissioned a 3rd one, but then with each project actually exemplifying our consistent yet very diverse approach to a same problem. So the first one is Sunset Public Theater. This is our winning entry for the very first competition the city held in 2019. We propose a publicly accessible terrace deck. Why not call it an urban stage at the top of the existing building? This was going to be surrounded by digital media, by lighting, and by a modulated facade and some landscape. The existing building holds a Chase Bank, which was recently renovated. I mean, it's not a bad building, but it wasn't ours either. But yeah, nevertheless, I mean, some of its features, specifically the curving corner, became an asset and something that could definitely work with. And you would agree, I mean, as architects, unfortunately, we don't get to choose context. So we don't get to say, hey, no, can I choose another site, please? Unfortunately, we cannot do that. So, but we still, I mean, we were able to work with it. You see the before and the after, both the strange resemblance and at the same time, the important differences between the two as well. So the project proposes a meandering media wall with a curving sign at the corner This wall wraps and zigzags, surrounding and modulating the entire observation deck, or again, the urban theater, as we call it. And then it falls down to the sidewalk where public stair is placed. Of course, nothing is this simple, and what we do takes tons of trial and error and a lot of ugly stuff in between that, of course, I mean, we decided not to show you tonight. Perhaps in 2041 when we come back. So in the side plan, you can see how the theater is facing Sunset Strip, but also bends to look towards the east. And in this way, it can bring the urbanism of the context and the extensive views back into the project. Ultimately, we didn't want to create just an object, but we wanted to create a contemporary public stage, a radical civic proposal, and a space that doesn't really exist anywhere else on the Strip. Unfortunately, despite winning and the project actually becoming a poster child for the city's civic ambitions, this project won't happen. So sometimes context is inaction or even stupidity.
There you have it.
I had to say that,
yes.
Sorry.
Yes, the message to it's very clear, but there's no one here, so don't worry. The second proposal is Wonderwall, one of the winners of the second competition, and it's considered a gateway sign. Our colleagues Florencia, Andrew, Hitoshi, along Craig and Min, who completed theirs recently, have also a project nearby, so we're really in good company. This site is where West Hollywood transitions into Beverly Hills, hence the Gateway denomination. It's a quite remarkable and consolidated urban site. The existing building is a recently renovated Gruen design from the 60s. It's a great example of a corporate modernism which we not only appreciate secretly and not so secretly, but relate to, and also wanted to expand. In the east-facing corners, as you see here, there's an existing static sign which our proposal aims to convert, to digital. Of course, do a whole lot more than that. Given the singularity of the site, think of the Flatiron in Union Square. I'm talking about the fork in the road. Our project aims to do two fundamental things. First, to operate at the scale of the building by taking over the entire facade. And second, to break the sign into parts, 3 parts, so that each part in a rotational mode can face the direction of the Strip right before the bend, where basically you have like, a mile and a half or 2 miles of a straight vision. So the rhythm of the advertising images will shift from flat and continuous as you approach from far away to serrated and 3-dimensional as one moves closer up, and pass it. We studied different versions of how to modulate these 3 vertical columns. You see some models here. We do models, not a lot, but do some, and how they will read not just architecturally, but urbanistically. And this is interesting because this, of course, my colleagues here knows this and require meetings with the city who argue that their preferred schemes pointed drivers, and this is urbanistically, in the direction of Doheny Drive instead of Sunset, like drivers will take a direction just because of the sign. This never really occurred to us, but we, of course, accept it and move on. So context, of course, unfortunately, is compromised. The sign will be clad in white aluminum to match and integrate with the existing building. Even though the model was black, we shifted to white because it was better. We'll use solid and perforated panels as well as LED sticks. So the elevation of the existing building will be a see-through, and the billboard will operate as a kind of digital rain screen. The new sign really kind of skews the building, giving it depth, shape, and light. We're working with Ove Arup to hang the new facade, to make it kind of lightweight and hang it on the existing building so we don't have to actually bring columns or anything outside. So our idea was not really to make a crazy object on top of a building. So, it's not a parasite, but to reshape a building to look in a different way, maybe like a split personality. And to be a gateway and a landmark, our proposal included spaces that either inaccessible, like the case of this rooftop garden in the corner, think of some of the taller buildings in there and their views, or accessible, such as the sidewalk along the Strip, will improve the overall human experience of the site. So we're working with SWA for landscape, creating a small park in the corner of the bank, which is one of the oldest in West Hollywood, which will allow users to interact physically and digitally with the site and the history of finance. This is a bit of a narrative that the city required, but most importantly, we really thought about this Wonderwall as this sort of space of wonder, the kind of a magic facade that somehow would transform an existing building and give it a kind of new life and a different aesthetics. Finally, this is Gil Pixel Turner. It's a smaller but equally challenging project at the corner of Sunset and Doheny Road. Context is history and also preservation, especially here. Whether or not it has architectural value to us architects, if it has a value to a community, then we must engage it, critically, of course. I mean, that's what we think. This is the existing 1923 Spanish Revival building we're working with on this project. The building is considered a historic cultural resource in the city of West Hollywood, and then it must be preserved and enhanced as part of our proposal. We never done anything like this. For reference only, we didn't win this competition. There was another project before us that won. It was called Cell in Hand. We're obviously not doing anything like that, but this is also context. The challenge in this project is really how to add to the existing, maintaining a level of compatibility and contrast between old and new. These are actually words that don't come from us, come from our historic preservation consultant, which we need in order to make this project a reality. Early on, we devised a controlled stacking of and piling of primitive masses and place them right at the corner. Our intuition in this never really changed. When you have a corner, you must take it, and this was an important one. At the same time, we also calibrated the forms and volumes with the lines of the existing red tile roof. The intention was to create somewhat of a symbiosis between old and new. The sign itself is pretty simple. It's a two-sided object that addresses the two main directions of the site, with also the most compatible advertisement formats. Vertical portrait celebrates and reinforces the corner, and a horizontal format addressing western views. The intention was to create a shape-shifting composition that, with radically distinct readings depending on the approach. A pile from Sunset, a vertical totem from the corner, and a hollow character from Doheny. At least, so we're hoping. For material, and this is a big part of our problem with context, we also consider these two things, compatibility and contrast. And drawing from the color of the weathered roof tiles, we settled on a copper finish, reflective and matte aluminum, and at least this is the kind of project as of now. Viollet-le-Duc advocated for an imaginative restoration, a form of preservation that involved adding elements and will turn buildings not back to the accurate historical form, but to an imagined originality. This was a polemic argument, of course, but it is a little bit in our mind when thinking about preservation in this case. Think of the sign as a corner marker, not just as an object, but also enhancing the existing composition. You can see Florencia's sign on the street. We're trying to be good neighbors, so by placing it in the corner, it won't disturb the views.
So context is also heritage. So here we are, in this case in Saudi Arabia, where the project takes on Qaṣr al-Farīd tomb, also known as the Lonely Castle. By the way, this piece is in the back of our book, even before Winka saw the cover, it was already there. It is truly an icon, and it is very close to our heart and mind. And the project engages with the problem of over-tourism and the preservation of monuments and ruins, and how architecture can proactively protect and elevate their continued experience for all the generations to come. So we propose a radical expansion of grounds around the site, including a museum, a visitor center, and also some research programs. To protect the cultural monument, we literally limited public accessibility to it, and at the same time, we were able to maximize its visual experience. So the building surrounds the monument with a polygonal shape. Very, very long and leaning terraforming walls allow for an ever-changing relationship to the horizon, to the ground, and to the object without visitors ever getting too close to it. So ultimately, the new building acts as a mound or maybe as landform that offers a contrasting datum to the irregular shape of these absolutely beautiful geologic boulders and their architecture. And when walking around, some walls project the original historical inscriptions of the monument, now transcribed into the monolithic granite mass. Other walls guide visitors to descending into the ground while framing the monument in the background. This is also creating, at the same time, a space for resting, being away from the desert heat and the sun. So ultimately, the project almost like operates as an instrument for framing history and for conserving heritage, both conceptually and organizationally, but also formally and why not experientially. And context is also conformity to local traditions and to the vernacular. We are lucky to have the opportunity to work in some very remote and highly prescriptive vernacular settings, in this case, Indonesia, particularly in Bali, where the work is not just about design, but also about engaging with local traditions, building practices, all of them very, very different than the ones that we are or we were familiar with. So I'll walk you through just two projects we are doing with a Singapore, Australia-based hospitality company called Karma Group. I bring this up because I know you will see that name posted in almost all the slides, just because of how many projects we've been doing with them. Our collaboration with them has spanned for a number of years, where we have been able to develop a series of projects, mainly in Europe and the South Pacific. So the first one is the last phase of a large resort development. This is located at the very southern tip of Bali and is facing the Indian Ocean. The existing resort consists of a collection of villas and usual amenities, all organized and distributed along a creek that connects the back of the site to the beach. The new phase, as we call it phase 6, will add 2 new buildings and common grounds for the entire resort. So our site is located at the very back of the property with no direct access or views to the ocean. So what might have seemed like a limitation actually turned into a very productive constraint that pushed us to design buildings that actually had to look inward and towards the shared amenities and ultimately toward one another. So our proposal generates a form of, as we like to call it, a tropical micro-urbanism. 2 buildings at further ends that create very, very strong beacons with a meandering pool space generating a promenade. Imagine a piazza Navona with water, or perhaps underwater. We use volcanic stone that has long been used in Hindu temples, which gave the work both structural weight and most importantly, it gave it cultural character. In fact, this stone is widely used around the island. It is very affordable. It's a very affordable material to work with. It's cheap, it is robust, and it's very, very black. So it was really a dream for an architect, or at least for us, to be able to work with it. So the courtyard building, the U-shaped building, creates a very playful stepping on the balconies, generating a pattern that prevents it from being too monotonous. The cube one, or the little brother, allows for more play on both the mass and has also a split roof that creates or defines a very different character. So both buildings use a base of local limestone that is consistent with what already exists in the resort at large. And the rainy season in Bali is brutal, so the overhangs, almost 4 meters on the front and around 3 meters on the back of the building, protect the direct effect of showers. So taking advantage of the shape of the roof, we could allocate some mechanical stuff on the rooftop, leaving also a clear central area for some greenery and common amenities. So this plan shows a little closer the relationship between the two buildings, the pool, the common spaces, and all the surrounding villas. The larger building to the left has a mass configuration of an open courtyard that in a way reinforces a sense of interiority and intensifies perspectives from and towards the common areas. There is a very clear idea of a front and a back. Instead, the smaller building to the right stands freely and has views all around. It operates more as a landmark and perhaps a transition to the front of the resort. In here, units are laid out to maximize views towards the common space, and access to the building happens at the two elbows of the U-shape. The sections are pretty straightforward, as they need to be, sometimes when operating on a hospitality typology, but actually the smaller building takes advantage of its more unique character, both in terms of its position within the larger complex, but also its smaller scale, and offers 4 very distinct elevations and different layouts of units on every floor. Definitely, this building is much nicer in elevation. The other one is maybe nicer or more attractive in plan. And I guess, I mean, this happens, you know. So lastly, the common areas are organized around a very large pool with a swim-up bar, a beach, a cellar, and a restaurant, everything else in between. It's a brief that repeats itself on every project we work with this company, so be ready for all that alcohol taking place in that. So, being away from the ocean, actually, our idea was to generate a form of internal oasis. So buildings, pools, and transitional spaces, in a way, choreograph and stage almost theatrically the inner life of the resort. The pool and common areas act as a promenade, which added to the landscape and the vegetation creates a very vibrant environment. So while we didn't design the villas or the original master plan, we convinced our client to unify materials in the new area of the resort. So basically we wrapped all the existing villas with the materials that we started working on for the new buildings. The inner corner shows the access to the apartment with a concrete cast looping stair. As you get inside the buildings, outdoor lobby and vertical circulation areas become almost like accent zones that are clad in local brick as well as wood to create not only contrast, but also a micro-ecological experience, including some water features, volcanic rocks, and hanging gardens. A wine cellar near the pool. Here is a courtyard building that is bookending the composition as seen from the pool. The two side walls are articulate in nature. I mean, not just because we wanted, Of course, we wanted it that way, but also to satisfy the need for Hindu ornamentation that is required by local code. So the interior is both transparent, but also offers degrees of privacy through the articulation of different types of wood patterns. Different from the oceanfront villas, this area of the resort is way denser, and we thought it was important to articulate not only all the building masses and facades, but also the necessary transitions on all the common areas, almost like a form of exotic urbanity in the jungle. So this view shows literally the stepping stage around the pool and the different materials and thresholds as they meet each other. So this project is starting construction mid-January 2026. We're finally breaking ground after almost 6 years in the making. So yeah, we're very excited about that. So Karma Candidasa is another resort in Bali. We just started working on, same client, very similar project brief. Recurrent brief with all these swim-up bars and DJs. It is a very similar typology as in the previous project, yet in this case, the project needs to adapt to a terraced landscape, and it needs to step down the hillside as units and amenities cascade down towards the ocean. So this project is located on the northern part of the island and just a little bit removed from the coastline. Here, the roofs and hut forms are more broken down, creating a collective form. And they're pretty much tailored to individual units and separate masses that, in their outline, create a more symbiotic relationship with the surrounding landscape. Balconies open upwards, and also roof lines appear as sectional cuts, camouflaging with the background. Both masses and pools cascade down the hillside, and along with volcanic stone, we also were using tropical hardwoods that carried forward local craft traditions, while also offering some practical flexibility. We also were given the choice to work with bamboo. No questions about what our answer was. Luckily, they took it. And, well, the client's favorite, kind of marketing image. And the perhaps establishing shot, situating our strange huts with the other local huts. Ultimately, working on these projects has pushed us to rethink our cultural ambitions through local knowledge, to try to find design solutions that are both responsive and but also are rooted in place.
So context is also natural disasters, change and resiliency. Georgina runs the kind of White Lotus part of our office, and I get sort of down and dirty. So located in Pacific.
He gets to talk with the music in the background, so.
Located on the Palisades and overlooking Temescal Canyon, this project began as a substantial remodel and addition to an existing mid-century home, now lost to the fire. Our design really aims to enhance and augment the site's unique features, which included a house, while overcoming the challenges imposed by coastal regulation, hillside context, and of course the continued fire hazard. Those of you working on houses know this. This was the existing house, which in its odd way had a character and position that was kind of unique in the hillside fabric of the Palisades, especially on the canyon. Seen in this view, you can see it's a diagonal disposition of the mid-century bar, very different from all the neighbors. It actually was so strange to see why it was there like that. But of course, this existing house followed the contour lines of the topography, which in this trapezoidal property made the bar to be positioned almost opposite to the ocean and completely separated from the street. This is just to show some of the documents that end up shaping projects like this, and then in forms of constraints. Reusing what was there, the project kind of creates a new aggregate, that also gives the house a presence on the street. Interestingly enough, whether the house is there or not, of course, it's no longer there. The topography is still there, and just keeping that or maintaining certain fidelity to it was important. So a substantial remodel added to these layers of bureaucracy of coastal development permit, which started in 2022, and now becomes a fully new house, which is still under permit. We have public hearing and so on. So what was a totally disconnected house from the hill now becomes this sort of new aggregate, integrated and maintaining some level of independence and interdependence, between each part and the whole. At the street level, you have a sort of simple but mute but kind of engaging facade, and yet you have these kinds of volumes, in this case the bedroom volumes that are actually kind of stacking over what would have been the existing house, and yet creating a little bit of a courtyard in between. The clients really wanted to maintain some sense of privacy, and we have never designed a house when we're doing two of them. Now this one is actually the first one. It was important to somehow get to know this. From the hillside, the memory of the old mid-century stays with the house, and this was important. So the new composition is both more grounded but also kind of unstable, following the hillside terrain with a cascading mass and also chiseled outlines. The new house, we want to show drawings because we like drawings. Sometimes you wonder, but you run out of things to say. But the house has 4 levels, and it's organized around this courtyard. It was hard to convince the city that this was only a 2-level house because, if you counted the floors, you ended up with a whole lot more. And so you always have to somehow argue, In elevations, you can see the cascading nature and how the cuts of the volume also help with the encroachment plane and side setbacks. So we will never say that actually shaped our project. We wanted it that way, but somehow you find some sort of alignments that help you, make a point. Almost every level and every space is at the different level, allowing the mass again to maintain fidelity to the slope, which is something we needed to do anyways. And you can see the cascading effect over the courtyard in this kind of more colorful axonometric and isometric and a little ADU in the front as well. The clients really wanted to maximize the space and to get something quite amazing. Of course, you know what happened, and we're not going to talk about that. There's plenty of it, and there will be more on Friday. This was the existing house on the street, with a very, very humble 2-car garage, and this is what was stayed of it. So before the fire, we had agreed with the owners that the house will use charred timber wood in its facade to capture the forest spirit of the canyon and its lush vegetation. We had tried metal, they didn't like it, and we somehow, we thought this was actually a good idea. Of course, we had considered fireproofing before, and we consider it now with other fire suppression systems and so on. But we thought, and really thought this seriously, that the material will have a different connotation now after the fire. Our clients, very, very thoughtful filmmaker, thought that we should double down, and we had a very emotional discussion. They were not in agreement. They said the house and the material was beautiful, and its experience will be different once the context evolves. So change is not always the answer, and sometimes, we need to ignore context.
So sometimes context is your own work. This is Casa Alicia. It's a small addition to an existing house that we had previously designed 10 years ago, where we had a very rare opportunity, not of a do-over, but of a maybe do it again and hopefully do it better. So the project is located in the outskirts of Rosario in Argentina. This is our hometown. The house is part of a gated land subdivision in a very rural context that is populated by these beautiful mature eucalyptus trees and definitely with a feeling of countryside. The house is located at the end of a cul-de-sac. It's a second home and a summer house for a person that is living alone. So our original task was to add a pergola, just that, just a pergola. And yeah, believe it or not, ideas of a bamboo pergola came up from the client, and of course, there is no way this is going to happen. We walked her to actually do it out of concrete, which was a really nice upgrade to ideas of bamboo. But our proposal actually does more than just being a concrete pergola. It adds a new brutalist character, perhaps, to the house, and it creates a seamless relationship with nature and to the outdoors. So we basically extended the existing home to expand all its social areas by enlarging the living room towards the outside. And we propose a large covered outdoor social space with a gallery that would allow a much fluid relationship between interior and exterior, as well as a much more intimate connection to the garden. You can see the very intricate geometry of the existing house and how it extends towards the concrete pergola. In the original house, we use brick all around, but also on the roof, which is not that common. But then the new concrete pergola extends both in shape and geometry from the existing volume. The new concrete gallery creates shade and shadow, and it reduces heat gain in humid summers while also maintaining really beautiful natural light. So this addition creates a very contrasting composition by integrating concrete and brick. The new concrete veranda extends naturally from the forking geometry of the existing brick house, while also emphasizing and augmenting its original features. So the original V shape is emphasized, and it's affording a more, kind of like a more nuanced relationship with the garden, as well as a very different presence when approaching the house from the outside. The new gallery is completely built using cast-in-place concrete, and to allow for a sense of privacy and openness from the inside, columns are long and thin, to suggest a sense of continuity between vertical and horizontal planes. Similarly, these volumes were placed on different sides of each corner to frame also exterior views as well as interior ones. So concrete surfaces were cast using wooden planks that were half the regular size. We were interested in kind of emphasizing texture while also bringing the dimension of the brick into the concrete. And to cope with the very exuberant rain of Argentina, we created a concrete gutter that projects outside and becomes a very expressive feature which accentuates the rural character of the house. So this is some of the transitions between spaces and materials that are happening organically, sometimes with gaps and others with thresholds, and creating a form of visual distortion as one moves from interior to exterior. The interior is white, it's modest, it's spacious, the client wondering if she made the right decision. And finally, well, we built this project in collaboration with our very dear friend and colleague, Guillermo Bantini and his team in Rosario. I'm bringing this up because the relationship between architecture and craft is far more fluid there than in the US, and you can really do these things with people that really care about their work. So, as a small, this is a small film. Now I get to talk with some music in the background. This is showing the unusual setting of the site right across the Paraná River Delta. In the Argentine Pampas. We are gonna let this play. we just try to show a little bit of how this small house creates this fluid relationship to the garden, framing views and vistas in pretty humble but profound ways. So these two materials, I mean, brick and concrete, are probably maybe the most used in Argentina, both maybe used and misused, both in Argentina and Latin America. Nevertheless, I mean, incredible materials to work with. So I'm gonna just let this play.
Anyway, we thought about having a conclusion, but then we really settled on no conclusion, so we're going to leave it there.
I think
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.